Welcome to a new episode where we explore one of the world's most talked about cases. In many of the cases I talk about, especially those involving official investigations, I always emphasize one thing: the precision and dedication of good investigators. You see it clearly in some cases and completely absent in others. What makes the difference? In my opinion, certain professions, especially those that deal with people's rights and lives, require more than just skill. They require integrity, principles, and above all, conscience. It's not just about showing up and earning a salary. Take investigators, for example. When they care, when a case stays in their mind and they're determined to reach the truth, they usually get there. But when they treat it like just another task, even the clearest evidence in front of them gets ignored. That's exactly the kind of case we're dealing with today. But before we dive in, if you're enjoying these stories, let me know what kind of content you'd like to see more of, especially formats or ideas you've seen on global YouTube channels. I always read your suggestions. Now, let's get into the details of this case. Our story today takes place in the United States, in Star City, West Virginia, and goes back to July 2012 with the disappearance of a teenage girl named Skylar Neese. She was the only daughter of her loving and devoted parents. Her sudden disappearance left them shattered. What happened to Skylar? How did she vanish? And how did an app like Twitter end up revealing the truth? Let's go back to 1996. Dave and Mary had a baby girl named Skylar, their only child and the center of their world. She got everything she wanted without question. They were protective of her when she went out, where she went, and how she studied. During school, Skylar became close friends with a girl named Sheila Eddy. Sheila's family situation was different. Her parents were divorced, and she lived with her mother. But thanks to Skylar, she rarely felt lonely. She was always welcome in Skylar's home. Her parents even treated Sheila like a second daughter. That continued until high school, when Skylar and Sheila met a third friend, Rachel Schoaf. Rachel also came from a divorced family. The three of them quickly grew close. Skylar's parents welcomed Rachel too. Even though Skylar was younger than the other two, she was responsible and focused on her studies. She also worked part-time at a local restaurant and loved music, especially playing the piano. Sheila and Rachel were about 2 years older. They enjoyed going out and partying together. Often they spent time without Skylar and eventually started experimenting with things like weed and alcohol. Skylar tried to keep them grounded. She often urged them to focus on their future. Sometimes they listened. Other times, they pulled her into their lifestyle. Then came the night of July 6th, 2012. Skylar came home from work, spent a little time with her parents, and told them she was tired. She said goodnight and went to her room to rest. The next morning, her parents noticed she hadn't come out of her room. Her mother went to check, but Skylar wasn't there. Her father knocked, no answer. They looked inside. Everything seemed normal, except her bed hadn't been made, which was unusual for her. Dave turned to his wife and said, "Have you noticed our daughter's not home? Something doesn't feel right." She tried to calm him. "Maybe she went out with her friends," she said. But he couldn't shake the feeling. He stepped out onto the balcony for a smoke, and something caught his eye. A small bench had been moved directly under Skylar's window, and the screen was pushed out of place. She had clearly snuck out during the night. That's when panic set in. Why hadn't she come back? Where had she gone? Just then, the phone rang. It was the restaurant. Skylar didn't show up for her shift today. She hadn't called, she hadn't texted, her phone wasn't ringing. That's when Dave called the police. When officers arrived, they checked Skylar's room. She had left behind her phone charger, her contact lenses, her toothbrush, things she would never leave without. It was clear she had left, but something had stopped her from coming back. News of her disappearance spread quickly. Friends and neighbors were shocked. Soon after, Skylar's friend Sheila called her parents and said, "She was with me and Rachel last night. We picked her up around midnight, drove around for an hour, then dropped her off near her house. She didn't want to be dropped right out front. She asked us to leave her at the end of the street." That raised red flags. What had happened between that corner and her front door? Investigators checked nearby surveillance cameras. At 12:26 a.m., a white car appeared on the street near the Neese home. Moments later, Skylar could be seen sneaking out, running toward the car and getting inside. but the footage was too blurry to identify the license plate or who was inside. When the investigators reported back to her parents, they said, "We don't think this was a kidnapping. She probably left on her own." They treated it as a runaway case. No dogs, no helicopters, no immediate search. Skylar's parents were devastated, but they didn't sit back. They decided to search on their own. Sheila stayed close to the family. She visited often, comforted them, and even helped to look for Skylar. Rachel, on the other hand, wasn't around. Her parents had sent her on a church retreat, saying she was too emotionally shaken and needed time to recover. So, one girl was there, the other was gone. Would they help find Skylar? Who was really in that car? And what role did Twitter play in revealing the truth? Let's keep going. At first, people thought Skylar had been kidnapped, or maybe even murdered, but then the surveillance footage told a very different story. It showed her climbing out of her bedroom window in the middle of the night and willingly getting into a car. Some assumed she was sneaking off to meet a secret boyfriend. Others thought it was just one of those reckless things teenagers sometimes do when they want to escape for a while, even if they have no real plan. By July 2012, the police still weren't treating her disappearance with urgency. To them, this was nothing more than a teenage runaway situation. But her parents never believed that for a second. They knew their daughter too well. And she would never have left without telling someone, without packing, without at least taking her essentials. Then something shifted in the investigation. Rachel, Skylar's other close friend, returned from her trip. Up until that point, she hadn't been questioned by police. Her family had kept her away from the spotlight and the investigators. But now that she was back, it was time to hear her version of the story. From the very beginning, something felt off. Rachel wasn't like Sheila. While Sheila had seemed calm and confident, even cooperative, Rachel came across as uneasy, visibly anxious. She struggled to remember certain details, kept contradicting herself, and couldn't seem to stick to a clear timeline of what had happened that night. And in a case like this, those inconsistencies were more than just red flags. They were signals that something wasn't right. So, the investigators made a smart move. They asked both girls, separately, to get into a car and physically retrace the route they claimed to have taken with Skylar on the night she disappeared. Sheila went first. She drove the route with complete confidence, pointed out key locations, explained where they had picked Skylar up, where they had driven afterward, and where she claimed they dropped her off. Nothing about her behavior seemed out of the ordinary. Then it was Rachel's turn. She got behind the wheel and took them on a completely different path, a route that didn't match Sheila's version at all. And when the police confronted her with this, she froze for a moment before quietly saying, "Maybe I'm just remembering it wrong. It was late, and I was high." It didn't convince anyone. That was the moment investigators started to truly doubt both girls. They returned to the original surveillance footage, this time examining it frame by frame, looking for anything that might have been missed the first time. They wanted to verify whether Sheila's car had ever shown up at Skylar's building that night. And what they found confirmed their growing suspicions. Sheila's car, the one she claimed she had been driving, never appeared on any of the surveillance footage near Skylar's home. The only car caught on camera was that same white sedan Skylar was seen climbing into at 12:26 a.m. At that point in the investigation, they couldn't definitively prove who the car belonged to, not yet. But one thing was certain. Something in Sheila's story didn't add up. And whatever the truth was, it had been buried under lies from the beginning. So the investigators began digging into the girls' digital lives, especially their activity on Twitter. And what they found added an entirely new layer to the case. In the days leading up to Skylar's disappearance, she had been tweeting some very pointed and emotionally charged messages. Messages filled with frustration, betrayal, and even warning. She reposted a picture of Sheila and Rachel out together, without her, and captioned it in a way that suggested she knew something they didn't want getting out. That was when it became clear that this wasn't just a missing person case. This was something personal, something much darker. Meanwhile, Rachel's behavior at home was getting worse. Her parents said she had become violent, unpredictable. They were so alarmed by her emotional state that they admitted her to a psychiatric facility, hoping she would stabilize. But just a week after she was discharged, Rachel walked into the police station, and she broke. She couldn't hold it in anymore. Over and over, through tears, she kept saying the same thing. "We stabbed her. We stabbed her." Investigators gave her space. They sat her down, brought her water, and waited until she was calm enough to speak clearly. And then, finally, she told them everything. Rachel confessed that she and Sheila had planned Skylar's murder in advance. They had talked about it days before. They chose the time. They picked the location. They packed cleaning supplies and a change of clothes. It wasn't spontaneous. It was cold, calculated, and intentional. That night, they picked up Skylar like they had many times before. She snuck out of her room, placed a bench under the window to climb down quietly, and met them outside. She thought they were just going to hang out, smoke, talk, like always. But instead, they drove her to a remote wooded area on the outskirts of town. Once they arrived, they told her they wanted to relax in the woods for a bit, maybe smoke together. Skylar didn't suspect anything. She walked with them into the trees, probably laughing, completely unaware. And then they attacked. They pulled out knives and stabbed her. Not once, not twice, but over 50 times. She tried to fight back, screamed, begged, but it was 2 against 1. When they were sure she was dead, they went back to the car, pulled out the supplies they had brought with them, and tried to bury her body. But the ground was too hard, the tools weren't enough, and they weren't strong enough to dig properly. So instead, they left her under a tree and covered her body with leaves, rocks, and branches. When the police went to the spot Rachel had described, they found Skylar's remains exactly where she said they would be. The white car from the surveillance footage, it was confirmed to be Sheila's. And later, forensics found Skylar's blood inside that same car. As for the motive, Rachel and Sheila said it was because they didn't like her anymore, but the truth was more complex and more cruel. Skylar had begun to speak out. She had grown tired of their behavior, of their constant partying, of their secrecy, and most importantly, she knew their secret. Rachel and Sheila were in a relationship. They hadn't told anyone, and Skylar had threatened to expose them. It wasn't about judgment. It was about betrayal, fear, and control. They were terrified she'd ruin their image, destroy their reputations, or separate them. Skylar had also been outspoken about their drug use and had made it clear she didn't approve. So, they made a decision. If Skylar disappeared, their secret would disappear with her. With Rachel's confession, the blood evidence, and the recovered body, police charged both girls with first-degree murder with premeditation. Because they were over 16, they were tried as adults. And in the end, the court sentenced both of them to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Skylar's life was taken by the 2 people she trusted the most. Not out of rage, but out of fear, calculation, and a desperate attempt to protect a secret they never wanted exposed. And if it hadn't been for the investigators, the ones who paid attention to small contradictions, who double-checked the camera footage, who looked into the tweets and the silence between the lines, maybe Skylar's story would have been lost forever.